I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, I want to break down a preset that I've put together inspired by the late, great John Sykes. This is mostly going to focus on the sounds from the Whitesnake 1987 album, where John was mostly playing a Les Paul Custom into a Mesa Boogie Mark III Coliseum, so a 180 watt version of the Mark III head. There's not a specific Mark III model in the Axe-Fx FM9 and FM3, but there is a model of the Mark IV and the Mark II-C+. You could use either of them to cop this sound with very similar settings. I like the Mark IV lead mid-gain. You can see the very basic settings on here, and if you're not familiar with the way Mark series amps work, the EQ might look a little bit weird, but the EQ is pre-gain in a Mark series amp. So while I've got the bass and mid really low to tighten up the pre-gain tone and the treble quite high, I'm using the output EQ in a kind of V-style shape to sculpt the tone. I've paired this with a free V30 IR that I made of a Marshall cabinet with 4 vintage 30 speakers. From memory, the mics used to capture this were a Shure SM7B, a Royer 121, and a Sennheiser MD421. We've got a little bit of the large chamber reverb on there and some dual detune. If you go online and look up the isolated guitars for a song like Still of the Night, you can hear a very prominent short to medium style reverb on there with some nice early reflections that really beef up the guitar tone. And the guitars are double tracked and probably run through something like an Eventide or an AMS pitch unit with a little bit of micro pitch on there. So that's why I've chosen these two. Let's hear the raw amp and cab tone in there. I'm also using a little bit of the shred boost on here just to compensate for the fact that I'm using low output burst buckers on this guitar rather than the high output dirty fingers that John would have been using on there. So just the amp and the cab, then we'll bring the reverb in, then we'll hear it with the dual detune at the end of the chain. I like that shortish decay on the reverb there. The dual detune makes everything sound super wide on there. One little trick that you can use to cop some of the extra crust that you hear in those isolated guitars is to go to the preamp tab of the cab block and select something like a tape style preamp in there. They would have been recording onto tape back in the mid 80s, and I like this tape 35 US with the drive at around 1. Saturation at noon. Let's just hear the difference between without and with it. It's just going to add a little bit of character and crustiness to the tone that you can hear if you look up those isolated tracks. So I like that as a little bit of extra spice on top of the rhythm tone. For the lead sound, I've basically just copied these settings from channel A over to channel B, but I've engaged the fat switch on here just to change the mid-range character, make it sound a lot more saturated and smooth. And then I've added the vintage digital delay, mix at 20%, feedback at 20%, and time at around 600 milliseconds. If you go over to the neck pickup on a Les Paul, you get this gorgeous, thick, saturated lead sound. finish things off, we'll take a look at the clean sound inspired by the 1987 album and the first Blue Murder album. Listening to the isolated guitars, it really sounds like a DI guitar tone to me. Maybe run through something like a Rockman, which was very popular at the time. So I have posted my Rockman Clean 2 settings up before. To recap though, a tilt EQ with somewhere between 9 and 12 dB of gain, depending on your guitar. I've gone for 10 dB with this guitar. Center frequency at 1600 Hertz on there. This is essentially like a simultaneous high shelf boost and a low shelf cut on there. So it's taking out a lot of low end energy from the DI guitar. We're then hitting the compressor. I'm using the Studio feed forward compressor with the ratio at 6. Essentially, this is acting like a limiter on there. So we're really making the guitar sound nice and sparkly. Then we're squashing it with the compressor, running it through the analog stereo chorus. I've changed the reverb type to the chorus hall, something a bit more lush, and then again the dual detune. You can experiment with the placement of the detune, whether it's before or after the reverb. I just like it after the reverb for something different, but the real trick there again is this tilt EQ in the comp, and then we're using chorus and detune to make it super lush. Probably played with a Strat style guitar and single coils, but I'm going to use the middle position on this Les Paul. I think it still sounds pretty great. As always, I want you to use this as a starting point to dial in your preferred guitar tone on here. Hopefully the tricks with the Mark Series amp, the Rockman style filter and compressor setup, and then the extra little bit of spice by using a tape style preamp in the cab block are things that you can use in any tone you want to build on your FM9, Axe-FX3, or FM3, or hopefully you can just grab this preset and crank out a bunch of Whitesnake, Blue Murder, and Thin Lizzy riffs and just celebrate the music of John Sykes. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below, and if you've got any requests for future presets like this, let me know as well. Otherwise, go and make some guitar noises, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.